Hello, everyone. We are Hypercube. We are chatting with the fantastic composer Sam Pluta. He is going to talk with us a little bit today about his music, and in particular his piece that he wrote, which is featured on our new album called Brain on Fire. The title of this piece is very interesting, American Tokyo Daydream IV. Could you possibly talk a little bit about the title and how you came up with it?
Yeah, I can talk about that, and I want to talk about also the subtitle, which is Data Structures Monoliths. So the title came from a series of pieces that I wrote. I wrote 5 pieces in this series, so ATD 1 through 5, and I started writing the series when I was 25 years old, and I remember going to a couple art exhibits in museums like the Tate Modern and the Venice Biennale, and I was particularly struck by Japanese modern art, and there was something about it that I found really refreshing and really empowering for what I wanted to do, because I felt like it didn't seem to have a tie to history that a lot of European art had, and it seemed to be able to deal with materials in a way that was liberating and kind of not worrying too much about what the materials mean historically, but just taking them as they are now, and then being able to construct ideas that were fresh and new because of that. So I took that as my inspiration for this series, and this piece is definitely in that series. It hopefully takes these musical structures that I think of as monoliths, these big blocks of sound, and it deals with them as okay, let me step back for a second. The other thing I was dealing with at the time was writing software programs that I could improvise with. And what I found was that in writing software programs, I had to make data structures that were musical. So dealing with data and then dealing with data in a way that came out in musical phrasing. And one of the ideas that I came up with, it's very tied to the music of Cecil Taylor, where there's like an idea, and then there's another idea, and then there's another idea, and then we're going to go back to this idea, and then we're going to go to another idea, and then we're going to go back here and repeat these 2 ideas. So taking these block ideas and then figuring out ways to like rotate them around each other to create meaning. And so it's kind of the convergence of those 2 things kind of just hitting each other. This kind of very shallow reflection on Japanese modern art, and this idea about dealing with data structures in a musical way that I was dealing with in software, but I wanted to then bring into my music.
Jay, I think you have a question that you would like to ask.
Yes, well, you actually just touched on it a little bit. So much of your music that I'm familiar with involves electronics, live electronics, um, and this piece is purely acoustic, and and I'm just wondering in what ways the sort of 2 affect each other. How much of your work continues to be purely acoustic, and how that's
Yeah. There's not much that's purely acoustic, but there's definitely pieces every now and then. I just finished a recording of a piece for Spectral Quartet, purely acoustic piece. And when they commissioned the piece, they said, "Oh, what are you going to do with electronics?" And I said, "Nothing, because I would like you to be able to play it without me." So that is, one of the wonderful things about this piece is that you guys played it a ton, and because of that, and your phenomenal musicianship, this recording is so good. I mean, it's so good. And one of the issues with writing with electronics is that especially if you need to be there, if it's not just a tape part or something, then it's like really hard to repeat the performances. So it was really awesome that you guys took this on and played it all over. But as far as like the relationship between electronics and my music, it's constant. It's one of those things that's always there. It's my instrument. It's the instrument I play. And I like to use, I say this all the time, I think of like Messiaen. If you listen to Messiaen's orchestral music or piano music, it always sounds like an organ, and it sounds like a French organ that has particular kind of like stops that sound a certain way. And if you go to France and you hear the organ, you're like, oh, it sounds like Messiaen, because that's always there in his music. And I feel like it's always there in mine, no matter what I'm doing. And this piece is definitely no exception to it. So I think one of the things that you can do really easily with electronics is make a really nice drone. And I wrote this piece a while ago. So it's 2007, and I think at the time a lot of the electronic music I was hearing was super drony, and I had gotten into making like really nice drones, but I wanted to stop doing that, and I wanted to start breaking up the drone. So it's almost like making these like really big thick sounds that you can make so well with electronics, but then chopping them up kind of in a mid 2000s EDM way, or IDM way, where you're taking sound and chopping it up. So that's definitely there in this piece. And then if you go to my other music, it's just constantly there. So I recently wrote a piece for large ensemble, for instance, and in order to write that piece, I made all of these electronic drum sounds on my analog synthesizer. And when you make an electronic drum sound on an analog synth, you realize you actually have to make every part of the sound. So it's like I had to make the attack of the sound, and then the decay of the sound, and then the resonance of the sound, and then the long decay. And so in order to do that, you have to actually construct each sound. So like, okay, the attack is like a little pew sound with a white noise burst, and then there's like a resonance that's doo, that kind of sound that you hear in these like 80s drum sounds. And so by going back to constructing drum sounds, then I started constructing orchestrated drum sounds. So there's a piece where these orchestrations really come out of working with electronics, and I think that's a trend in music. That's back to Ligeti. That's where a lot of the innovation in acoustic writing has happened. Is through going back to the studio and listening to what we're doing. And then also how computers like interact with us, and how we interact with them, and how we interact with analog synthesizers and analog computers, and that creates a certain kind of interaction, and that's very prevalent in this piece. A certain kind of interaction that was created that resulted in the formal structure of the work as well.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think we have an excerpt that we'd like to play from the piece.
Awesome.
So yeah, Andrea, I'll let you get that started.
This is a bit from the opening of the piece.
Awesome.
I love that kick.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, it's interesting. It's just I think I got the bass drum for free, the one that we used on that
good
recording. Yeah. Was kind of lucked out. Yeah, well, just from hearing that makes me miss playing the piece. So looking forward to once we can do live performances again doing that. So Andrea, I think you had a few questions as well. Would you like to fire away?
Yeah. So this is one piece on our album that's been adapted for us. Adapted throughout the process of composition. And so can you explain a little bit about how this version came about and the different stages that this piece has taken on?
Yeah, and I've got to say I think this is the best version, and that's super exciting to, like, after many years and many different versions, to come up with, I think, the best version. And your recording is really awesome. So yeah, the piece was originally written for accordion, saxophone, and guitar, and so Michael Ibrahim, who now lives in West Virginia, commissioned the piece for his group that was that instrumentation. It was him, Oren Fader, and Eric Wubbles. And Eric, at the time, was playing accordion. He no longer really does that. So I love the accordion. I think that's like, it's such an amazing instrument. And as an electronic musician, it's one of these instruments that just really fits well with my sonic palette, because it becomes this like sine wavy glue behind any ensemble. So so I really love that version. And then a couple years later, Dan Lapel's group, Flexible Music, I was in discussion with them about it, and I was like, hey, maybe I could make this version for piano, and because Eric Hubner was in the group, so piano and percussion, guitar and saxophone. And so I did. And they played it a little bit. But I was never really happy with the piano part, actually, because it kind of revealed to me I really wanted that sustainy accordion sound, and so much of the writing is about the interaction between the saxophone and the accordion, and the guitar and the accordion, and how they kind of beat against one another, right? So there's like tones that kind of like hit in funny ways, and the piano couldn't quite pull that off because it doesn't sustain the way the accordion does. There's like trills and stuff that don't quite pull off what a sustained accordion does. So then I don't know how you guys even found out about the piece or what happened, but you eventually started playing it, and I think it was your idea actually to do the version where it's like the accordion version with the percussion, and then that was the version that I was really happiest with, and it kind of got all of the it got the impact that the percussion added without taking away the really nice sustain of the accordion. And then I also made a couple edits. There was one spot in the second part that I just, sometimes you have these pieces where you're like, why did I do that? Why did I do that thing? And eventually when you were going to record, I was like, can you just take those bars out, please? And you did, and I like it a lot better now. So
Cool. Yeah, it's definitely a blend that of the four instruments that we very much enjoy. So, Erin, I think you have a few things that you'd like to chat with him as well.
Yeah. So you mentioned this, Sam, that you started the series when you were in your 20s. This piece was actually from 2007, so it's the oldest, the oldest track on the album. Can you talk a little bit about how you think of this piece in terms of your own compositional style, and how your style has developed, I guess, over the years and even up till now?
yeah, I mean, I think this is the first piece where in acoustic music I successfully pulled off this like block structure where I'm dealing with the data structure. So what we were talking about earlier, data structures, monoliths, this kind of these rotational blocks of sound that are rotating around each other, which is the whole first half of the piece. And then the whole second half is almost like one of these blocks just goes like boom and grows into the whole piece. So I think this is the first piece where it's the most successful at doing that. But then I think that all my music after that is kind of an outgrowth of that structure. So I've been taking that structure and kind of manipulating it slowly over time until at this point maybe it's not as discernible. So this is really like the if it's like I relate it to like a American kind of brutalist architecture, kind of Louis Kahn kind of architecture, where it's just these like pillars next to each other. And if the music has kind of gone away from that, then but this is still the germ of my musical language, where I take ideas and kind of, rather than developing them, kind of just quickly move between ideas to create forward momentum. And I think in the last couple of years, what it's turned into is these much larger pieces. So I mean, literally the same day this album was released, Wet Ink released an album that had a piece of mine on it, and it's the same structure. So it's called Lines on Black, and it's the same structure, but like a 40-minute version. And so the blocks themselves have kind of grown. So the drones have become drones again, but still the idea of how the music develops is very similar. So I really feel like this piece is was a kind of groundbreaking piece for me, a really important piece in my development, and it created a musical language that I'm still using now.
Awesome, fantastic. So we have another excerpt we'd like to play. And so, Andrea, what part of the piece is this one from?
This is from the end, so it's an example, a little bit of the drone style that you were talking about, Sam.
Yep.
Cool.
Catchy.
Awesome. Yeah, so cool. I'm just kind of curious, how did you decide the length of that last section of the piece? Did you just sort of do it by feel, or did you sort of have like a mathematical approach of like how many repetitions or duration?
Yeah, it's definitely by feel. I think what's nice, one of the things I've kind of discovered in working with blocks over time is that when you get into a block that is sustaining or not moving, the block can almost be any duration. So I feel like it needs to be a duration that feels weighty, but at that point it could be 20 minutes. I mean, I think Aaron would kill me, but I thought you were like holding your breath during that we were listening to that, like, because there's so much you have to put so much into your instrument to get that to work. But I think that the duration can be almost anything that feels like a duration. So, but then it becomes like the phrasing. So the saxophone is slowly changing multiphonics, and it has to happen a certain number of times to feel balanced. So that's what I'm pulling off. But this was definitely one of the first pieces where I figured out that taking a giant piece of staff paper and then really blocking off time and not even worrying about what the notes are yet, but just and that's kind of what a big sonic structure like that allows you to do, because nothing's really changing. So you're just imagining how long something takes and then marking off where you think things need to change and then going back to it and putting in all the details. So it's like almost like the whole section needs to be written before you even write it. And that's that allows you to be intuitive with time, which is very different than when you're dealing with nitty gritty, millions of notes.
Did you, this question relates to the end as well, regarding like the percussion, because at the end it's a large tam-tam that I roll on, and I was always just curious why you decided the tam-tam and maybe not like an array of cymbals. Right. I've done drone stuff in the past where composers have liked a variety of like size cymbals for like all the high frequencies, but this one's unique. It's just one large tam tam right at the end. Is that just because you felt that range or spectrum of sound fit better with what was going on?
Yeah, it's definitely the spectrum. I think when I wrote it, I had maybe just seen the Reese Chatham piece for two tam tams, so that might be part of it. But the saxophone kind of needs to be the lead here, and then the guitar is higher, higher up in the register. So they're already pretty high. So you want the percussion sound to be lower. Also, the whole first half of the piece, the saxophone is in the soprano saxophone, and then flips over to the tenor. So I want that to, like, the saxophone and the tam tam to be fusing into like one timbral space. So that's why I want it to be the lower, richer sound. Not that the tam tam it also has tons of high harmonics. So. And then the accordion is like one note on either side of the spectrum. So it's like really trying to create this like block of sound that everything is inside of, and you can hopefully hear everything moving around, but things don't really separate in a way that might happen with cymbals. Cymbals would also work, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting how you have to think of like the different layers of the spectrum, like how you would orchestrate them in that sort of block kind of compositional structure that you've been talking about. It's pretty cool.
Right, and I mean, thinking about a sound where you're trying to hear the counterpoint, and a sound where you're trying to create a fusion. Those are two totally different things. And in the end, if it's fused correctly, if the sound fuses correctly, then you do create a counterpoint, because it becomes something you want to like go in, like put your ear inside of and listen inside the sound, rather than, I think, like, I don't know, I might regret saying this, but like in Bach counterpoint, where like you kind of have to step back and like hear the voices move against each other. This one, you want to step forward and hear the sounds kind of blending and mixing, like in a bowl of sound.
Yeah. Interesting. How did you get into composition in your earlier days? I mean, were you somebody that was more interested in technology, and then you sort of stumbled onto the music, or you kind of doing both worlds, like music and tech stuff at the same time, and then you just discovered that you could merge them together?
Yeah, it's definitely the latter. I say this a lot in interviews, and I didn't study music when I was a kid. And so when I got to college is when I started studying music. And I got to college, hadn't studied music, and I started taking piano lessons, and then I like got really into that, and I was practicing all the time, and I was a terrible pianist and continue to be terrible. But I was practicing like 7 hours a day. I couldn't get enough of it. And then I started writing music, and there were just things started coming out. And at one point in my composition study, I remember, like, most of the things I'd written had been terrible. And I brought something in. It was a piano piece. And my piano teacher, or my composition teacher, said, "Oh, well, okay, this is actually something. Like, maybe you could be a composer." So I started like really getting into it then, and what was awesome about this guy is, like, he just really pushed me to make the weirdest stuff, which is so strange, considering I was at this small school on the West Coast, and he didn't write particularly weird music, but I think he maybe saw that I could, when I did that, I would go into this other place that got really creative. And at the same time, the school got like a Pro Tools system that that no one knew how to use, and like they literally didn't even know how to set it up. And so they basically put the boxes in a room and said, "You figure it out. You go in that room." And I did. I went in that room, and I never left. So that's and I went in the room, and I set it up, and I started working with electronics. And so when I graduated college, I was a computer programmer. Actually, I worked for a year as a computer programmer, and that's where I learned my real programming chops, was in industry, not at school, even though I was a computer science major as well. and I started learning to program computers for sound. I started learning C sound, and then I went and did my master's degree at the University of Texas, where I studied with Russell Pinkston, and he kind of taught me the ropes of electronic music, and so that's where I merged the two practices, and have kind of been doing that ever since.
Cool. Wow. I would never guess that you started music as like an 18-year-old freshman.
Yeah.
I guess yeah, right around there. That's amazing. I think that's about it. I was also, we when you were living in New York, we did a few shows together way back in the day, and you had your own analog synthesizer, I think, like that, like square board with the rectangular buttons on it. Are you still using that a lot when you perform, or are you building any new like devices now?
Well, there's an analog synthesizer right there in my screen, and there's another one right there. So I'm definitely using those. One of the things I've found is that going on tour with that thing is a pain in the butt. So I mean, the main thing I do is I write software for performance, and I've been augmenting it with this analog synth. And what I've been working on lately is using, so I have a joystick right here. And using the joystick, and then using neural networks to map the controls of joysticks and other controllers to control synthesizers. So internal digital synthesizers. And what I found is that I can get that analog sound with digital synthesis, with the control with this like analog, real physical control. And so that's kind of what I've been working on this year. And I'm really excited about it because I didn't know previous to this year that I could be that expressive with digital electronics, like digital synthesis, that I can now with using these neural networks. So that's what I've been working on, and it's super fun and exciting. And then, I'll also do like live processing on other instruments. So I'm still working on that stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's very, very, very cool. Aaron, maybe do you want to like just give the viewers a heads up on how they can buy the Hypercube album that has Sam's piece featured on it? The various sources that they can get it. There we go. Awesome.
Sure. Yeah, the CD is available at Bandcamp. It's also available, the hard copy is available if you go to Amazon. Access is distributed to Amazon, so you can buy the physical CD there. The Bandcamp page is run by New Focus Recordings, which is our great label, run by Dan Lapel. And it's in all places. You can go to the Hypercube website, hypercubemusic.org, and find the links to all of those sources.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks a lot, Sam, for sharing your time with us and talking about your music and your thought process. It's definitely very, very, very cool. And,
yeah, thanks for having me. This is really fun.
Yeah.
And thanks for putting this out. This record's so good, and you guys play so ferociously and beautifully on it. I mean, when I heard this recording of this piece, I always thought this piece was so angular and like, and you made it sound like music. It's really awesome to hear that.
Yeah. But we rehearsed a lot.
I know.
Lots of practice. Yeah.
We're lucky to get to play it.
That's true. Yeah, we did. Yeah, like you said earlier, we had performed it quite a bit on tour, so I think that helped kind of like put it together and let it grow into our own thing. So it was very cool. Okay, thanks so much, Sam. And that concludes our interview with Sam Pluta. Thank you very much, everyone.
You guys.
Awesome. See ya.